Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. In this show, together with our guests, we explore different ways in which we can develop a meaningful relationship with our bodies and minds and respond to the current state of the culture in a quest for more integrated and embodied perspectives. Hello and welcome to another episode of Material for the Brain podcast. Before we begin with today's episode, a short announcement. I've received recently a request from one of the listeners of the podcast if there is any possibility to contribute financially to the creation of those episodes. And I've decided therefore to create a certain donation page, payment page, in which if you are enjoying the podcast and would like to contribute financially to the production of future episodes, then I would leave a link in the show notes and you're welcome to do that, and that would be highly appreciated. Okay, let's go for today's episode. Today my guest is Moritz Lembert, who is a life, business, personal coach who is dedicated to helping individuals unleashing their full potential and doing it with peace. With background in dance and embodied practices, his work is grounded in practical wisdom and radical honesty, with a no-nonsense approach that catalyzes profound personal and professional transformation. His coaching encompasses everything from personal development and spiritual growth to strategic business planning and team dynamics. In our conversation, we have talked about the transformative experience Moritz have had, his epiphany moment, so to speak, and what are the preconditions for such experiences. We have talked about the relation between personal catastrophes and transformation. We talked about agency and the difference between self-responsibility and good environment. We talked about the state of enlightenment and its relation to everyday life. We talked about the fear of death and how it prevents us from obtaining our own potential, and much more. And without further ado, here is Moritz Lembert. Hello, Moritz. Welcome to my show. How are you, my friend?
Hello. I'm very good.
It's pretty nice because we've just met, I think, 10 days ago or something like that in person.
Yeah, in Vienna. With the best curry I've eaten for either years or ever. I tried to recreate it, like no joke. I tried to recreate it at home. And I was not at that level yet.
Yeah, actually, it's good that you remind me about the curry because I have the same friend coming over tonight and I was thinking maybe I should make curry, but I already made curry.
I wouldn't never be bothered offering it to me, not again. I mean, be bothered to offer it again because I wouldn't get tired of it. It was delicious.
That's a good compliment. Cool. No, the visit in Vienna was really nice and it provoked a lot of, as I told you there, we should have already recorded our conversation in my living room because it was very interesting and enriching, and I'm looking forward to see what will come up today. And I thought for the starting point, maybe you can take the audience. I heard already your story, but you can take the audience and kind of give us a short, maybe 5-7 minutes intro to what you're doing now and how did you get to do what you're doing, so that we kind of all on board with your story.
Got it. Yeah. So what I'm doing today, I coach mainly entrepreneurs, some individuals, some people who are employed, but mainly entrepreneurs, around their internal and external challenges and goals, you could say. So I try to call myself a business coach, leadership coach, life coach, and all of them can fit because it's all topics that I work with. And what I do in my work is to support people navigate to put it philosophically, like the challenge of existing. Like we have this internal dialogue going on about everything that happens in our life, and we judge everything that comes our way. And sometimes that can become a real struggle, and it can inhibit performance, be it in a business context or in other contexts. And that's what I do now for a living. I talk to people, they talk to me, more talk to me than I talk to them, and I ask some probing questions, and it can literally change their lives, the trajectory of their lives, when they see things that before were in the unknown. So that's kind of the work I do. It's called coaching, but coaching is a term, I think, undefined for many people. When they hear coaching, they have a lot of associations with that. But yeah, I would say that's kind of what I do. I partner with somebody to land in a different place than they would without my intervention. And how I got there, it's an interesting journey. I started out as a dancer. Now must be 17 years ago, and my curiosity in dance has been, first of all, about my own expression. I really wanted to experience being free in my body, in movement. And I think somehow I had a reflection on that actually yesterday. Somehow what happened there is somehow the same work I do today. Because how I got to be a dancer was, I was standing on a dance floor after a rock and roll concert, and a DJ came on, and I never heard drum and bass music before, and I never danced before. And the guy started playing drum and bass, and it got me moving, and I started dancing and expressing myself without thinking about myself. I was just there being danced by the music. And somehow I think I was looking for that state in being a dancer. And it's what I did over many years. First, I was very interested in my own expression, and then in the expression of other people. I worked in different projects, did community dance projects, worked with people on dancing, on connecting with their own bodies, on being in connection with one another through the body, and explored a lot of different venues in the world of movement. And when I was about 25, I had a epiphany, you could say. I had a moment of realization where I realized that I wasn't what I thought I am. And that shift was so out of the normal experiences that I had that it totally got me out of a slump that I was in at 25, questioning my identity as a dancer, questioning my trajectory in life, questioning what life really was, who I really was, what life really is, what's my purpose, where am I going. And in the midst of that inquiry that wasn't very pleasant, I had this epiphany. And what I got in that moment is I wasn't the content of my thinking, and I wasn't the content of my feelings, but somehow I could perceive all of that. So I became very interested in the question first to, can I change the content of my thinking? Can I change the content of my feeling? And also, what is that that sees my thoughts, that sees my or feels my feelings, that experiences body? What is that? That was a question I then had. And I went deeply into different, practices. Some would call them spiritual practices, but it's simply practices, meditation practices, inquiry practices. And I came across somebody who happened to be a coach and offered me some coaching. I didn't know what coaching was at the time, but she coached me around the question, where did I want to go in my life? And after 2 sessions, I realized I really wanted to do what she was doing, and said, like, where did you do this training? Found my own training and started coaching. And that's now about 6 years ago. It was a transition from being a dancer, and I also am trained in shiatsu, Japanese form of acupressure, massage, and therapy, and slowly coming out of that into full-time coaching, running retreats nowadays, where I try to bring back what I learned about the body into the context of coaching, and people, I'd say, uncover parts of themselves that usually are beneath the everyday experience of being alive, where we are in the train of thoughts about what we have to do, should do, what's next, and getting the grocery, taking out the kids, doing this, doing that, out of that into a deep experience of what they are and what they're capable of.
Oh, I have a lot of follow-up questions. I need to kind of think, quickly prioritize them in my brain. But maybe let's start with what you just finished. You said, okay, so you have all these daily responsibilities, but then you can slowly tap into what you really are. What is that?
Like, if I would say I knew, I would lie. And I can say it is possible, in my experience, to have an experience to be outside of that everyday concerns, everyday worries, everyday thoughts, and still be there. So there's something that's always being there that's not the particularity of thoughts that you have. And when I look in my own life, like for one moment I was this identity, Moritz Lembert, the dancer, and then that fell off. And then a new identity came along, and then that fell off. And then a new idea about myself came along, and then that fell off. And every time there are new ideas coming on and then they're falling off, I still remain. And the same goes with physical sensations, right? You can have an experience and then it passes and it goes away, and there's something that's always there. You could say it's the perceiver of it all, it's just presence, it's consciousness, it's, I don't know, like I think terms are always misleading in a way, because they get us back into the conceptual mind, which is like the thought process that we have, trying to make sense of the world. But my clear sense of it is that this is happening within what I really am. That's like the closest I can put it. But I'm not a scientist on that, so I haven't figured out what that is. There's some interesting discoveries, like the Higgs field. There's this matter that seems to be all encompassing, and in quantum mechanics and stuff, they seem to find interesting ideas about reality, but ultimately I have no idea if they're true or not. From my own experience, I can say everything I think I am can be challenged, and when I really look into it, I won't find what I think this I, me, my sense truly is. So you can always go deeper than the first idea that one brings up.
No, I mean, I think that first, I totally in alignment with what you're saying, in the sense that you cannot, let's say, the realm of words is still in the subjective. So of course, when you're trying to tap into something that is beyond that, then you're going to a realm that is beyond words. So of course, it will just be some kind of representation that will provoke maybe images, maybe certain emotion in this, whatever. And there's few questions. Maybe we'll start first with, like, before we talk about how can this experience be shared. Maybe you can tap into how did it happen to you, because you shared with me in the past and also now briefly, like that. Okay, that through a certain spiraling down, something cracked, and that pattern is something that I've heard it from other people as well, and I also had moments like this in my life. And I wonder if you have some ideas on the why in your case.
Yeah, It's interesting. I just recently picked up a book again of a gentleman. His name is Gary Weber, and he gave some neuroscience to this process of I don't know what you want to call it, like awakening, waking up from who we think we are to what we really are. And there's some interesting neuroscience on that topic. And he spoke about that it very seldom happens to individuals who haven't practiced. And when I look back on my own life, I was thinking, like, is that true in my case? And I haven't done like the yogic traditions or inquiries at the time previous to when it happened to me. But what was there beforehand was that I did a lot of physical practice on relaxation and letting go, like tons and tons and tons and tons, like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of that practice. And I think, like, that's my logic saying, I think that somehow was also part of why that happened to me. Because I know some people who get really fed up with themselves and they don't have an experience like that. And the sense I'm having is there's more still rigidity or holding on there that in my case somehow could drop. Now what I see is that there was a moment the mind was getting so fed up with itself that it had to look a different direction. Something had to look a different direction. And that was very much the experience I had, like this dark night of the soul, or like being lost in the realm of questions. And that experience, it was all thinking turned about itself. It was like, what am I here for? What is this? Why are we doing this? Why is this happening? Da, 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 da. And it was getting so uncomfortable. It seemed to me like in the moment it happened to me, there was somehow a, I don't know if people might not like this term, but somehow a surrendering to my predicament, that I was just fucked, and that it really didn't work, and that I didn't manage to think my way out of it. And that's, then something happened.
I mean, I think like, that's, if I think about the image that comes in my mind for this phenomena of like, okay, like being caught in that spiral of thought. So I'm thinking of something like a whirlpool, or like, there is a certain spiral that keeps, it's a bit like a negative feedback loop. You think, and then because you think more, and there's more worries, and then because there's more worries, you think more, and then you spiral. And then if there is a certain relaxation or a certain quality of relaxation in it, so you can notice, okay, that's happening, and I just go with it.
Yeah.
And then if you let go into the spiral, it will pull you to the depth that it needs to pull you, and then it will bring you somewhere else.
Yeah.
But my question, so when it comes to, doing it physically, I think I have a clear way how to guide myself into that. But when I think about it like mentally, I mean, that's, I think, maybe kind of the $1 million question, because this potential is not magnificent. It's like, it's revolutionary, this potential. But at the same time, I also know people who spiraled down and took their life. That could also be the case. Yeah. And for me, it's the question, like, is there agency there? Or is it coincidence? Or is like, okay, maybe I just carry a certain legacy in my body, mind, consciousness, my past experience that just enable that to happen? Or there is a certain quality of something I could have trained, or something I could have, that I did, that prepared me for that. because when I heard your story, it really reminded me a period in my life when I was in my 20s that I also went into a deep depression.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult to physically move out of bed. Like every little thing was very challenging.
Yeah.
But there was one day, in a split of a second, and I read it in one of your blog articles, and it's really similar. In that split of a second, that I've just realized, it is me who is choosing that. No depression anymore.
Yeah.
But I cannot recall what was that,
Yes.
Okay, why in this moment and not the day before or the day after?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, totally get it. I really don't know. And it's not it's not really adding to your understanding there, but I really don't know.
It's okay to be confused together as well.
Yeah. I wondered about that question, but if I really, really look consciously, and it's funny because I'm in this business of choice and ownership and responsibility, right? Like that's what I look at with clients. I look at where is it that you're refusing responsibility in your life? And when people take the stand that they are responsible for how life turns out to them, there's way more freedom in their expression. And it seems like it has an impact on their actions and their performance and their relationships and their satisfaction. However, I do not know what enables somebody to take that stand. It's like, if I look at it, I seem to be an environment that life created for people to have those kind of insights. And if I look, did I create all of that? Am I the one having agency in it? My logic defies it, because there's so many things happening all the time that influence how I'm moving, how I'm acting, how I'm thinking, what thought pops in my mind. I don't even know where my thoughts are coming from. I don't even know what I'm going to think 10 seconds from now. Like, how can one have the agency in there? Now, that's like kind of the paradox, because I do think there are practices that really enable one to experience freedom, and that really enable someone to drop a lot of their fighting against reality. But ultimately, I don't know what needs to happen in each individual mind for them to see that as a possibility for themselves and start on that trajectory.
I have a bit of a, I really like the sentence you just said, that maybe I am playing the role of the environment for somebody to dwell in order to get insight. And that leads me a little bit, when I was in my 20s, I lived in a Vipassana center in South Africa, and I was meditating a lot, and I had a lot of time there because there wasn't so much physical task to do. So I also had time to read, and I read a lot of this kind of, I don't know if you can call it like Buddhist folklore literature about like stories about the Buddha. And one thing that kept on coming all the time in the way the Buddha was described is that in his presence, many things changed.
Yeah.
So, somebody was very angry that, the Buddha came, and then many of his followers went to the Buddha. So, like kind of his business of promoting his idea didn't work so well. So he got angry and he said, okay, I'm going to go and confront this Buddha guy. So he boils himself in anger. And then when he came and he see him suddenly, like it just all the anger drops, and he's like, okay, man, you're not my problem. It's in me, and blah, 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 and reflection are happening, and light bulbs are turning on. And I think that that's a certain intuition that I have, that maybe, that maybe there is some, as you said, there is a certain relation between the individual and the environment, and that's a role we might play for others. And so maybe you can elaborate a bit, like, okay, so what is going on when I'm joining a process with you? What does it mean for you to be an environment?
in a way, like my experience with that is the less I have going on inside of me, the more space then there is for another person to discover whatever there is to discover. So you could say what's going on there is somebody else meets a human being who's not busy judging, pre-evaluating, having their own internal dialogue going on that they pay more attention to than to them. But ideally, and I'm not saying I'm always there, it's definitely not, that's my practice in a way. But ideally, like what I am being in that moment for that person is just, I'm just being a space with no limits for them to think, be, feel, share, and try and test. And that, in my experience, like when you tell this Buddha story, I'm not saying that I'm any close to that, but my experience in being myself, being coached by other people, what I always got is like the coaches that I really experienced as incredible, valuable to my own journey have been people who I felt they're just so free. They're just present with me. They're just purely present. There's very little going on where they're busy about themselves, how they look, what I think about them, if they said the right thing or not. That's just not there. And in that environment, I tend to relax. When I'm being with a person like that, I tend to not having to hold up this mask, I think, that oftentimes we have in social interactions.
And I mean, what I hear kind of on a certain fundamental level, and maybe that's a bit the difference between consulting and coaching, is that it sounds to me like that you're not there to tell people what to do, no?
No.
And in a way, that kind of points out very clearly to the topic of responsibility, as you say. But do you think that there is a value in, like, you know, if you see somebody doing an error, and that's maybe a question like, you know, I also confront it with my role as a father, with my role as a teacher. What's the value of like seeing somebody, you know, going fully with their head into the wall and saying, hey, that's not the right way to do that? Is there a value in that, in your opinion?
I think so. Yeah. I think it very much depends on the agreement you have with people, because there are people in my life, like if I go to a doctor, the agreement is not that he's going to be like, and what would you like to do? Where would you like to go? No, the agreement is you spend your life creating knowledge about topics that I don't have a clue about, that you can consult me in and help me make better decisions for my health. Right? That's the agreement I have with the doctor. And I wouldn't want my doctor to be all ambiguous and ask me probing questions and self-inquiry and I mean, sometimes maybe that's also valuable. I think it's a great skill for a doctor to have that, but then I really want him to say like, hey, and I can take one example. When I had diagnosed of Lyme disease this summer, right? And then I went to this doctor and I asked him like, what shall we do? And he asked some colleagues as well to see like what would be the best way of treatment. And then he suggested that way of treatment. He gave me the choice to say, I want to go for that or I want to try something else. But I was happy that he gave me this, right? He said like, I think you should do this. And it worked. If I would be left to my own devices there, I would have no idea what to do because I do not have the knowledge, the experience in that field. So I think absolutely can be very, very valuable to give someone a suggestion. And in my own process, like when I coach people, I mainly coach people And there might be moments where I'm suggesting something, where I'm like asking permission to give them a suggestion, right? And I might ask, hey, can I suggest something you do between now and next session? And when they say yes, then I might give them a practice, or I might give them a challenge that they can take on. And that also seems to have positive effects. So absolutely, I see value in that.
Yeah, because, I think that, again, like I like to always draw certain lines into, let's say, kind of the metaphysical qualities in whatever we are speaking about. And it feels for me a little bit that, like if we define coach as somebody who kind of dwells in the unknown and holds that space, so then it's like kind of you're mastering chaos. You're mastering feeling comfortable, not knowing, and not having the need to know. And in that experience, there is value. And then like a consultant who is like specialized and has a lot of knowledge, then they're kind of mastering order. They have a certain quality of predicting based on previous experiences and knowledge. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering like what is the when it comes to the, and maybe it kind of brings us back to the previous question, what is the accumulated knowledge that we can use in order to predict and support somebody to get into their epiphany? Sorry, I'm asking a lot of tough questions today.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Because, it's just like, since I met you, and I just want to be honest, I met you when we were much younger and we were both in the dance field, no? And meeting somebody that in the dance field, I think that, I don't know if you also had this experience, but if you can relate to it, but there is always a certain level, because of this kind of scarcity mentality, that like, there's the question, can we really share it? Or it's like you versus me, there's a certain space where like, like, okay, you meet somebody, you have good connection, but then it's like, okay, you both want to teach the next workshop in that venue and there's not a lot of opportunity. So it's really difficult to, and I'm not saying that I didn't have this moment, but it's really difficult to be like really fully with celebrating the success of other people in this field because of that kind of mentality. And then when I met you again, I felt like, wow, there is something so relaxed about Moritz that is very inspiring. And that's why I'm kind of allowing myself to throw this question at you, because I feel like that I do sense a certain genuinity in what you're sharing. I don't think you're playing the role, because, I heard these sentences dozens of times, but it's different when I hear it from somebody who like genuinely transmit that quality. That's why I allow myself to ask you, because, these are tough questions, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for giving them, because it's a question I don't really pondered on it, at least recently. What is the kind of knowledge? I think, to me, ultimately, the confusion seems to be that we derive our sense of self from something that is within the content of experience and not the context of experience. And I have found useful a lot of the knowledge that I gathered to help people to relax about their existence a bit more. And it might be practices I've learned, and it might be a certain sensitivity to my body. I think this was an enormous, or still is an enormous guide to me to see where I might be confused about who I am or what's important. As my body always seems to tell me if I'm getting rigid in my mind, if I'm getting rigid in my thoughts, if I'm identifying with an opinion so much so that I'm now in the business of protecting that identity as if it was the body. So I think there is a certain type of knowledge that to me seems helpful, and that is the ability, whatever helps you to distinguish experience, to distinguish thoughts and the space in which thoughts occur, to distinguish sensations from the story we have about sensations, to distinguish pain from suffering. That I find is useful. I don't know to what extent, because I'm not experiencing myself having gone all the way, and now like I'm a Buddha walking around, and it just comes out of the void whatever I say, and it's just pure wisdom. No, I fuck up a lot of things. I write posts about it if anyone's curious. Yeah.
But I recently just heard like somebody, I don't remember in which context I heard this this idea, but the whole notion of enlightenment as a permanent state is really not the case. But enlightenment is a state in which you visit and you come back. So it's like it's a certain potential that your consciousness can open to. And I had short moments that would be maybe in the same trajectory, but then you go back into your consciousness. You took something from it, and then you come back, and maybe there is a change in the frequency that you arrive to that place. But yeah, I feel like that environmental factor are very strong as well. I don't know if you agree, but I think like we are both speaking from living our life in very stable situation. I don't know, like how easy it is to do that in more challenging contexts. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Me neither. I don't know. It seems that sometimes suffering can really enable people to let go of who they think they are and be more open, and sometimes it can really hinder. So I don't know. I like what you said. I read a book recently. I can highly recommend if that's something of interest to someone. I think it's called The End of Your World from Adyashanti. He's like a contemporary teacher, Advaita teacher, and he described that process of like the identity loosening and then more openness coming in, and then something else comes back in, and that most people thought like, oh yeah, once you have this realization that all is one, you're finished. And he's like, it doesn't seem to be that way. And Gary Weber, this gentleman I mentioned before, says the same thing. Like it seems like endless enlargement of that process. And I find interesting the neuroscience on it, where they can actually detect in the brain if somebody is still in a very strong self-referential narrative or not, because they recognize the brain patterns that are active to create a sense of me around opinions and like the self-talk that most of us get bored or exhausted by at one point, seems to be controlled by that network, and that can factually shut down.
Interesting. No, it's I think it's a very big question that I know that many, as you say, in the field of neuroscience, people are looking at it, and of course, psychologists and whatever. Yeah, it's a big question. Like, why do we have this storytelling machine installed?
Yes.
And what is and how we can tune it down, or and when is it also functional? You have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have an opinion on that. I don't think it's to distinguish. There are thoughts that are in the business of planning, structuring, creating a narrative where there is very little sense of me in there, where it's just like, okay, you and I, we set up this podcast, and then I know to check my calendar and think about what do I need to set up this screen, right? So there's a certain practical thought process happening, and that happens in a different network than the thought process that is concerned with what is Matan thinking about me right now, because he tilted his head slightly, and is he judging me right now or not? And will people like this podcast after it's released? And oh my God, I haven't thought about saying this, and I said this a little bit weird, so maybe I come across like a weirdo. And that is a different network, right? It's a different storytelling network. Honestly, I don't think there is big value in that. I think there's immense value in slowing that down and giving less and less importance to that process. But it seems to be scary for a lot of people, because they derive their sense of identity from being a dancer, being in a relationship, being successful, being well-spoken, being good-looking, being whatever. And when you shut that down, that narrative, also that sense of identity with those traits slowly loosens and disappears. And yet, everybody I work with, if I could say, what is their struggle? It's just that. It's all self-referential thinking that creates the suffering. And I haven't seen where it, in the long term, seemed useful to keep up the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes in my mind, because one side of me, fully agree with you, and if I would have to put it in words, it's a bit like the quality of I'm just gonna let go of and allow gravity to pull me and just relax.
Yeah.
And there is another side of me that wants to find my ground and to say, but what about justice? What about morality? What about all these qualities?
Yeah.
That are a result of me and being embedded in a certain value system and having the ability to reflect on the world. And I think that's a little bit the tension that is always arising a bit with the objective.
Yeah.
How to have connection to the objective, but not to undermine the subjective and say, it's all an illusion, whatever you're suffering. And
yeah, I totally get that, because it's been hundreds of hours of thinking about that stuff. So I feel you 100%. If thinking it to a logical conclusion, that narrative doesn't seem to be in control anyhow. So your moralities or ways of treating other people are not derived from that thought process that we think we need to have. And I think it's hard to imagine that, but out of my own experience, I can just say it seemed to happen that way. When my shoulds and what I have to keep up, there was a willingness to let that go. Things that are useful are still continuing. But being kind, compassionate, less triggered even. It's when you have a problem in your relationship, you can be sure that there is a self-referential narrative running of something you disagree about what they just said or whatever comes up. Now, what seems to happen to those people who walk all the way is they end up being very compassionate. And they end up doing things for their community, society. A lot of the things that we would say are the good traits. And when I think about moments in my life when I'm really there, relaxed, open, and present, I tend to be in a good state. And from that good state, I tend to make choices and decisions that are in alignment with the group that I'm with the people that I'm with. So I totally get the question. And I put another question. What if letting go of that self-referential narrative would actually allow you to be guided by gravity, and gravity would guide you in a way far more in alignment with all that you ever wanted than that self-referential narrative could. And it's like dropping into the intelligence that created the body rather than that little commentator on the football field that says like, oh, now he tossed the ball to the left. Oh my God, oh no, if he would have done it differently, but has no impact on the game that's played on the football field.
Yeah, I think it's I think one of the person I've been following to some extent that have been grappling a lot about this question is a guy called Sam Harris. I guess maybe you heard about him. And he wrote this book, The Moral Landscape, as an attempt to connect morality to objective reality, so that we can derive what is good and bad, not just based on our subjective and intersubjective spaces, but that there is a certain objective good, which is also a bit of maybe a way to kind of stand in opposition to this very, this hyper postmodern society where words can mean whatever you want them to mean in whatever context. And I just realized how often nowadays when you speak to people, you have to say like, what do you mean when you say this word? Because it's like, words
there's
don't
no
mean
consensus on it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, what do you mean when you say that? So, and I think that for me, it's like a comforting thought to say, okay, there is a certain good in the world that I can aim towards, rather than, good is whatever that is good for me, and that's it. And then and I feel like that it's a bit of for me it's a bit too nihilistic to say no, there is no objective good. It's all just random, and you just do whatever good for you, and you hope that you stumble across people that will have some alignment with your good.
I can't say that I have a good theory on it or good knowledge on it. I don't know, it's just like what seems to be happening in my own life, that every time I let myself fall into whatever it is that is beyond my self-referential thinking, what should happen or what shouldn't happen, what I want, what I don't want, what I think is best for me, and I allow experience to unfold as it unfolds. Not saying I get passive, like I'm still active, I'm doing the things that I'm doing, but there's less going on in my head. I feel, and that's the best I can put it, I feel almost as if there's something holding me. There is like a quality that's there when there's less noise going on, that feels warm, that feels good, if you want to put it that way. And somehow I have the suspicion that it's very philosophical where we are, but it's the ground of being, and the quality is not a nihilistic quality.
Is it benevolent, you would say?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, I can't, now thinking about moments when nothing struck me. Like when I've been gotten by nothing in particular, just the moment as is, where it can even move me to tears to have that experience. And it's not coming from it unfolded exactly as I wanted, but it's coming from a recognition of what's always there. Yeah, that's the best I can put it. It's my subjective experience, so I have no idea if there's ever any evidence for that. Yeah.
but I think anyhow, if we're speaking about evidence, I think that, we are looking for evidence in the 4% of physical matter that composes the universe. So of course we will overlook anything that is not material, but I think for me there's a lot of value in hearing it, and I want to kind of bring it back into kind of your profession. And you said, like, okay, so I'm coaching a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs. Sometimes you could even label it as like kind of like business coaching. So maybe first, like, what does it and I've done some business coaching, and very often there is like really hard matrix that you measure success for a customer. How do you measure success, or like how, or maybe you don't measure it, but like how do you deal with the word success, and what does it for you, your own success, and what does it for you or for your client to succeed? And maybe it's many things, so I would be happy to kind of elaborate on that. If you enjoyed the conversation so far and found it meaningful, please consider to share the episode with others and to click the like button. These small actions might seem meaningless, but they are the fuel that helps the podcast project to move forward. Your attention and time is highly valued, and we would love to hear more about the insights you might have from listening to this episode. And please consider to subscribe to the channel to be notified for all future uploads.
I mean, I think my own definition of success is probably a different one than for somebody else. To me, in a way, it's experiencing existence peacefully. is a great measure of success. And I am working and I'm generating income, and I have certain things in my business where it's like, okay, I'd like to grow the business to this point within the next year. What would need to happen for that to happen, right? And then I might see, okay, my prices have to go up over the next period, or I'm generating a different program if that's the income level that I want to reach. And my clients, they have their own metrics for success. I don't give it to them. Somebody comes to me and has the goal to... I had a client who their goal was to build a team, and by the end of the year have like 6 people employed from being self-employed, like just being an individual solopreneur to going to being an entrepreneur, right? Like running their own business, having employees. And that was their measure of success, like getting the business to a point where it could hold that and then deliver on what their business was offering, like to clients, and generate new clients. Then within that goal, there might be sub goals of doing that all in a relaxed manner, right? Without putting extra stress on me. And that might be within their idea of success. I, as a coach, don't come in to tell my clients what their measure of success should be, unless it's something very specific where I'm leaving the role of a coach and being in the role of a advisor. For example, somebody who is building their coaching practice, I can give them some knowledge, some things that have worked for me, and we might track their outreach, connecting to people, and we might track those things. So there can be metrics. Usually when I start a coaching agreement with somebody, we define what is it that we want to accomplish within the time we work together. And that can go from, like, literally from money goals to I want to be at peace more of the time. And then we define what that means, right? Like, what does that mean to be at peace more of the time? And then we look within the coaching process. That's part of my responsibility to check in and say, where are we with the goal? And is it still the one we want to work on, right? Because what the other experience I have is people come in, and just right now I have a manager that I work with. He came in, he wanted to start a side business to become financially independent. Now, in coaching over half a year now, we got to the point to wonder, why does he want to generate this extra income? He has a great income. Why does he want that? And his association with the goal was, if I achieve that goal, then I'll be free. So what he's looking for is freedom. And it opened a different conversation where we now shifted from, we want to make this amount of money, to looking at what's getting in the way of his experience of being free now. Right?
Yeah. No,
I don't know if that's a clear answer, but it's
clear, because it's
it.
in a way you kind of answered the question that I had in my mind, because again, if I go back to this kind of the whole topic of the conversation is like, how do you deal with the fact that somebody comes with a goal that has been generated by the what you coined the self-referential narrative of what do they need, and then to which degree you allow yourself to ask, is it really what you want? And then it's a bit of a question like, then what is the time to intervene in a way?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a bit like what I just said as an example is how I'm holding that. I might give a suggestion, I might ask a probing question, but where I'm standing, I'm trusting their process and what they deem meaningful to be what their process is about. Because how they come to me and what the agreement is I'm helping them to get to that point that they are looking for. Now, my personal understanding and my personal, you might call it the philosophy, is that we are all looking for the same thing. We all look for freedom from mind as how it is used in the current state. And when that occurs, when thought quiets down, what we have is what we're looking for, is a sense of freedom, connection, love, self-expression, peace. And ultimately, all goals seem to go there. But I'm not in the position to point that out to everybody and know that for a fact, and I don't know what their process is. If I look at my own process, who would have thought that I would have this insight in the middle of a club? The first epiphany that occurred to me. Who thought? Like somebody else going to me and saying, Moritz, you should go in the club at this time, listen to this hip-hop track and talk to a friend of yours. Right? No, it's, I don't know. But going back to something I said earlier, the more I am this space without an agenda, the more it seems to me people tend to realize what they are actually looking for without strong intervention on my part.
That's an inspiring quality to develop, to be able to reflect that. And I read in your blog post like several, I think there was a few articles referring the whole topic of habits and how to change habits. And you know, like if I think about it in my job as a dance teacher, I often tell people like, hey, you don't need to drop your habits. There are certain patterns of efficiency you develop, but maybe the condition have changed and you can adopt new habits. And what does it mean for you to work on that with people? Because you know, it seems in essence that you're kind of, if I understand it, like in the essence, like you are trying to, not maybe you don't try to change, but the work challenges the most essential habit of how we listen to ourselves. And could you give an example of like maybe certain processes that have led to a change on those habits? And like, if you could, you know, like what was the moment that something changed in clients you worked with? Or
Yeah. I have semi-good experience with working on habits on the level of habits. Like, okay, just create this new set of actions and drop the other set of actions.
On a level of behavior, really.
On a level of behavior. In terms of taking, I don't know, we say like we realize this person is smoking and they don't want to smoke, right? And then like, okay, what's the process? Like, when do you pick up the cigarette? When it's like, okay, maybe you put the cigarettes in another room, maybe you don't buy cigarettes. Like, there are many things we could do to intervene with the behavior. What has really like, and it struck me many times how that seems to happen. When somebody gets the context for why they smoke, it seems like in that moment there is a new path possible. It's like and it's less like the storyline that we might go in, like, okay, as a child, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. Like, in the moment, they get like, I'm being driven. That's like where I'm coming from. I'm being driven all the time. And it's the context I have for life. Because what I think is, all behavior makes sense within the context that the person's operating from, right? Like, how the world occurs for them is in perfect alignment with their behavior. And when somebody gets not just the content and like, oh, why am I smoking? Why do I do this? And oh, I'm such a bad person for smoking, and I don't know what else might occur. When they get struck by the context, and to me the context can be the self-narrative at sometimes, right? Like, they understand that there's an identity around this, behavior can drastically change. On the other hand, there's a lot of behavior that never changes. And is it possible to change? Yes, could be. I don't know. In many cases, a lot of the patterns we develop do not necessarily change, even after a major insight or shift. But what can always change is the relationship to the thing that's happening. That's at least what I found, is a lot of the suffering is maybe derived not even from the smoking, but from all the stuff I tell myself about smoking. Right? And yes, you can stop smoking, but I'm not by the way, this is not something that I usually coach people around. I'm just taking it as an example. But even if you don't, it's possible to transform the context you have for your own behavior, so you're not suffering on top of what's happening. Yeah,
that's
I don't know if that's.
Yeah, it really reminds me, like my mother-in-law. She's a healer and a very wise woman, and despite all her years of working with people and helping people to heal from different physical and mental conditions, she eats a lot of food that maybe is like not healthy. And then, when we visit with the family in the summer, we always come back to Israel, and then we spend like a month there. My wife is always like getting crazy, like, Mom, how can you eat this? How can you eat that? Like, she immediately buys them some kind of a box of organic vegetables, whatever. And her mother always gets pissed, and like, it's like, I don't treat it as bad food, so it's good, and I think that, and when I hear it, it's kind of it's really kind of, it's very provocative, because it's like, on one hand you can really easy to excuse anything. It's like, it's like, say, like, look, cigarette for me, it's vitamin, and I keep smoking every day. It's like, you can really use it as an excuse, but beneath that, I think that there is a certain truth that we are sometimes, I don't know, I don't want to say afraid to admit, but it really stands in complete opposition to the main paradigm of our culture, which is, like, better, science will tell us, we can measure, we know. But at the end of the day, if you go and you start to ask doctors, why does a virus does what it does? Nobody can have that answer. We have no idea. We have an idea maybe that in a certain condition, something can happen, but we don't know why. Why did it attack me now and not yesterday? What have changed? I think there is a certain truth in that is that, again, it needs to be genuine to be real, because otherwise it's not otherwise it's fake. And I think where I experience it very clearly, and maybe it's I don't know what you would think about that thought, but when I teach performance, I tell people to treat attention as material. And we have a bit of this quantum physics kind of pointing to that the observer has a certain role in shifting the situation. And I think that, like, when you really tap into that, then there could be a certain realness to the experience that then really creates a real connection between you as a performer and the spectator. But if you just tell yourself it as a story, as a narrative, then again, maybe you won't really connect to the person who looks at you. And I think that there's a certain similarity with this analogy about health and habits and what is good for you. And I think that what you're trying to point is that the way you treat what are you experiencing has an immense power that is transformative, no?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not saying you will live longer, right? If you do that. Just to make that clear. But it's what seems to be the case from what I can observe is that when the context for why you do something is that you have to do it in order to fix yourself, in order to finally become complete, in order to fill a void that you some time in the past experienced, and you now still try to fill it, and you do all the right things. You do all the right things. You get up early, you meditate, you do yoga, you eat your vegan, organic vegetables, you are kind to everybody you meet, you do something that helps people, right, with their suffering, and you do all of that on top of not being good enough, not being complete, not being okay the way you are. You fill your life with stuff, but it's not fulfilling. And that's, I think the strangeness about this can be that you can meet somebody who is fulfilled, and you feel it when you are with them. But they do things that you, with your knowledge, do not agree on, in terms of, this guy is like drinking Coca-Cola every day, right? Like, it's not healthy. You shouldn't do that. But that person doesn't live in the fear of dying. And you do. Therefore, you need to do all this stuff. And that person doesn't experience needing to, having to, shoulding. And it can also be that that person lives exactly that beautiful lifestyle and is fulfilled. But then it's an expression of who they are, and not an doing it so to fill something they are not.
I think it was worth to have all these podcasts to get to that sentence. I loved it. No, because I think it's like what you point out there. First, I want to say that when you describe the person that does all the right choice, when you said then you eat vegan, for me I was like, I have to say, no, that's not the right choice. You have to eat some proteins, animal proteins, in order to be really healthy. But, so I had that, I had a moment of seeing like, what is my relationship to what is good, no? Immediately coming up, and the stories that I have to tell myself. But what I really loved about it is that, again, that at the end, you're pointing, or you're drawing our attention into something that is the ultimate expression of chaos, which is dying. And, like, nobody knows from experience, because after they experience it, they are not here to tell us. And we have different stories. Some people live their whole life just for the life after life, with different stories and concepts, but that what is underneath all the worries, maybe as a fundamental quality, is the fear of death. No, it's like, okay, then if you're like, why do you need money? Why do you want to be healthy? Why do you want to do, all of this kind of boils down to that kind of existential fear. And that's something I ponder a lot, and I have a lot of experiences with it, especially in relation to working with different substances, of like confronting that unknown. Does it play a role in your life?
Yeah.
What kind of role?
I think for some reason there's almost no day when the thought of death doesn't come up in my life. So it's a big point of contemplation, and I think a lot of what I came to in terms of my thoughts processes are deriving from the question, can I confront my possible endless being and be relaxed about it? And I had numerous experiences with substances that were the death of me in that experience. Now, me emerged afterwards again and had a lot to say about the experience. But
obviously.
Yeah, obviously. But it's been a very liberating topic to contemplate. A very, like really looking at it and then seeing what in you is still in opposition with it, in a fight with it, can be so revealing for the patterns you have in your life that are resisting life. Because ultimately it's just part of that existence that we have. But most human beings will spend their whole life pretending that it's not going to happen, and pretending that they can do something about it. And it's living in an inauthenticity with living it. And that to me is like the value of looking at death, is to confront me, to confront that whatever I'm making of it, and being with the question if I can let that go. And when that happens, that it is let go. You mentioned in this podcast, like you sensed a certain relaxedness about me, and I don't know, right? Like I'm not always relaxed. If I'm making a story about it, I think it does come with a certain confrontation with the topic, that there are very few things that really put the same amount of fear inside me that I had before some of those revealing moments with the topic of death.
Yeah, and I have the feeling that when we talk about environmental factor, I think that, like, if I'm trying to zoom out and I say like what is the quality, like the essential quality of like this huge structure that is the result of modernity, of the enlightenment movement that have built the world as it is right now. And I guess it's also similar in Switzerland to how is it in Austria. And I think that it's like predictability, control. These qualities are like so present. I go to the U-Bahn and it's written the minute that it shows up, and then it shows up. It's like the ultimate order. And I see how much we have, like just the fact that we have an anti-aging industry. It's like there is really like an obsessive denial of death, And I don't know, in the tradition that I come from, I'm Jewish, and there is a certain, like a dead body is considered the opposite of pure, like not contaminating, but like you don't display the dead body, you wrap it with something, and like so when you go to a funeral, you don't see the dead body. In comparison, I don't know, to a place like India where you see a lot of dead bodies being burned or stuff like this. And there is a certain ceremony when somebody dies, how to, like, you spend a whole week with the, you open your house and everybody can come and be with you in that kind of transition. So there's a certain cultural tools around death, but I think that, like, I don't know if you have, but I hardly ever had a conversation in any situation that I would say like that somebody who is representing certain maturity within my culture had guided me into that topic. And it's purely out of my own interest and curiosity. And I think that that's in essence like that's the biggest shadow of this kind of Western culture, that we don't look at death directly. And I think it really springs all the, a lot of the stories would be different, I guess, if death would play a really meaningful role. And I tried to have a conversation with my mom, and she's getting older, and I asked her once, like, hey mom, are you sometimes contemplating on your death? And she's like, you already want to kill me? I'm not thinking of my death. Why would I think of my death? It's like, wow. But for me, it's so intuitive. So every time I meet somebody who is also curious about it, I think, like, what is it there that pulls you there?
I think doing meditation and looking a lot into the functioning of my own mind, I realized that most of the fears ultimately can be tracked back to a fear of the unknown, non-existence, dying. And therefore it made a lot of sense to be with that, to be able to be with that fear of the unknown, as it seemed to me like the purest of all the fears. It's where all the fears boil back down to. And I agree. Like, it seems to me that a lot of the problems that we face as society in the Western world are centered in that fundamental fear that almost everybody runs around with, of dying and needing to survive, right? That's the end of my thought train here.
No, it's a big topic, because of course there is this kind of, like, I know sometimes I'm practicing with like breath work, and there's, like, what happened when, what is the space beyond breath, and then there is this bodily urge to breathe again, like a reflex. But I had recently, like, I'm kind of a bad swimmer, and I've been working on that. And now I've been starting to swim across the Alte Donau. I don't know, it's maybe 200 meter.
Nice.
And still, every time I swim, there is a moment that my brain tells me, you're going to die drowning now. And it's really interesting to see, like, how that kind of stress leads to a certain biological need to relax, because otherwise you will drown. So it's like, it's interesting, these paradoxes. Moritz, I want to give you some space to share with the listeners a bit like how they would be able to connect to you, or like what would you be able to offer to people who got curious about this, and yeah, and a bit about like where you are situated, how, like, just share a bit your work. And
so where I'm situated, I'm now in Switzerland. We just moved here, me and my wife. I'm in the process of officially being a member of this country. Then that's close to Bodensee, which is this big lake connecting Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. That's where you can find me in flesh. My work is primarily online. People who might be curious about that work, ideally you run your own business. You work with either people or materials, and I love the work with entrepreneurs who are looking to express themselves also through their work and make things happen in the world. It's a bit of my own character in a way, and I like connecting with people in that situation. What I also like connecting with is people who are really open and curious about taking things deeper with themselves. So if you're not running a business, but that's something that's pulling you, where you're like, hey, I connected to a lot of what Matan and Moritz talked about, and I want to integrate that into my own life and start a process there and have support on that journey. That's something I also very much enjoy working with and do work with. Places they can find me, I have a community on School that is SKOOL, the Art of Living Academy. That's, people can find that. It's a platform where me and my mentor, my coach, are hanging out in, and it's directed towards service-based professionals who run any sort of human-to-human service. And otherwise, social media, I'm on all platforms. My website's myname.com, moritzlembert.com, and I'm very easy to approach in terms of you can just write me and we can have a conversation. I might not spend 4 hours talking to you, but I spend time talking to everybody who reaches out. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I will put everything in the show notes, and I can also recommend the audience to check the website. There's a lot of really accessible articles that are very interesting to read, and definitely I can highly recommend diving into a process with you, because it has been fantastic to spend time with you.
Likewise.
And it's nice because we haven't met for many years, and now suddenly,
boom,
there is a strong connection. So thank you, Moritz, very much for your time.
Thank you,
and everything you shared, and for the openness to go into that conversation that was very, with a good quality of relaxation that opened a lot of emotions as well. So thank you very much for that.
Beautiful. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was thought-provoking and really, I like how much you dare to go deep. It's really felt and appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Until the next time.
Till the next time.
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.